Lucas from Huntsville hit me up. He said, what do you think are the ramifications for Alabama giving their general manager, Courtney Morgan, such a huge extension? They're big, man, huge. So Courtney Morgan's the GM at Alabama. He came with Kalen DeBoer from Washington, just signed a new 3-year deal, $825K per year. I saw this breaking news from Matt Zenitz last night, just another Z-bomb in a world of breaking news. I saw this news, and probably within the next 5 minutes, I had texts from 3 different general managers at 3 different major programs. 2 of them just sent the champagne emoji, and a third one sent words that were tantamount to popping champagne. And the reason is because Courtney Morgan just got paid, and Courtney Morgan just got all of them paid. It was a landmark. It was like a watershed moment for people at the head of personnel departments. Because for a long time, there's been this kind of sport-imposed ceiling on what your max earnings potential could be there. Well, that thing's been shattered 9 ways from Sunday. So now it's anyone's guess. This is like, I remember back in the day, Albert Bell. We once did a segment in my elementary school class. Albert Bell was the first $10 million per year Major League Baseball guy. Ooh, I think Mike Schmidt once upon a time, way back in the day before my time, was the first $1 million per year earner. And everybody had the same conversation. How could these guys be paid this much? It's just a sport. Well, how much does Aaron Judge make now? He makes like $10 million a month now. So people, let me tell you 2 things. First off, I don't think people appreciate what Alabama's pulling off here. Bama had the best in the world. Bama had the best of all time there for a decade and a half. When you lose him, it's supposed to be like pivoting the Titanic in Moon Lake in Phoenix City, Alabama. It's supposed to be a lot more difficult than this. You're not supposed to just, at the drop of a hat, say, Nick Saban retired, I'm going to go get a top 3 head coach in college football. He's going to bring his all-star general manager with him. We're going to retain, outside of Caleb Downs, Isaiah Bond, a couple of guys, ironically enough, pictured there, outside of a couple of guys, we're going to retain our roster. We're going to get one of them to transfer back, who left us for Iowa, and we're going to proceed to go lock down a top 3 recruiting class. Just like that. We're also not going to react to the market. We're just going to go set the market. Alabama shouldn't be doing this. No program should be doing this. When you've got Nick Saban, the trade-off to having Nick Saban is logic tells you once you lose Nick Saban, there's going to be a dry run. And there's going to be some rot, and there's going to be some laziness, and there's going to be some entitlement. And folks who have not had to think for themselves for a long time are having to learn to think for themselves. And in reality, that is not it. That's not it at Alabama. So they're pulling off something they shouldn't be able to pull off here. Now, as for Courtney Morgan, so Bama's paying Courtney Morgan over $800,000 a year now. Why so much? Because he controls the roster there. And roster is the beginning and ending of this sport. I don't care how good your coaching staff is. If they don't have players, you don't have a job for long. So right now, Bama, not only do I want you to look at the team they were able to retain once those guys walked in the building for this year, look at the recruiting class they're in the process of putting together for the upcoming cycle and cycles moving forward. Some of you disagreed with me last night and said, oh, Bama would be fine no matter what. You're wrong. You're wrong. I know what's going on. You're wrong about that. No, they wouldn't. Bama would be fine. Fine is not the standard in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Like, what are we talking about? 8-4, finishing the top 25 in recruiting? Yeah, they could do that. A ham sandwich could do that at Alabama. They had one. They had several of them between the Bear Bryant era and, with early 90s exception, the Nick Saban era. They don't want fine. That's not the standard there anymore. So Courtney Morgan gets paid what he's paid, and you either got one of 2 reactions to that. Either you say, $800,000 for a general manager, what are we doing? Or you say, yeah, that won't be a headline in 2 years, because in 2 years, because of Courtney Morgan being paid $800,000, he'll probably already have been bumped up again, and there'll be 3 7-figure per year earners, and then there'll be 10 7-figure per year earners. Everybody's GM will be paid that. I mean, that's real power, by the way, in any walk of life, in any industry. A lot of guys can get themselves paid. Only a few of them can get a bunch of their peers paid. Courtney Morgan just got a bunch of his peers paid. He knows Kalen DeBoer's system inside and out. He knows his way of doing things. That's one reason to pay him that. Connectivity to players, relatability to players, that's another reason to pay him that. roster retention and talent acquisition and understanding both of those markets inside and out. I mean, intimately being ahead of the game, kind of seeing around the corner instead of reacting. That's another reason to pay him that. You can't be reactionary, man. You just lost the best of all time. You can't afford to be reactionary. I mean, you had a guy who built Alabama into what it is today. He set the standard. He stepped down in his prime. He didn't wait until the program eroded and this cultural rot had set in on the back end like some other icons have done in the past. He built a monster. He stepped down while it was still a monster. He tossed the keys. Kalen DeBoer grabbed him out of the air and said, Courtney Morgan, you're coming with me to Tuscaloosa. He comes with him. Big-time offers come immediately. I'm telling you, Southern Cal came after him hard. Courtney Morgan grew up in L.A., by the way, and he turned it down to stay there. That's why you pay him what you're paying him. You don't keep up with the market at Alabama. You set the market. You are the market. That's the way it's been for a long time. So if you're going to keep getting what you've been getting, you have to continue being what you've been. This is part of it. You don't count pennies. Like you don't save a couple $100,000 here and there when it comes to something as valuable and quintessential as roster. Roster's everything in this sport. Now here's another thing that I think is very, very appealing to many people in this audience. Some of you everybody who's listening loves this sport. Every one of you who are listening, me included, we love college football. I've never coached this sport. Most of you have not coached the sport, or if you have, you haven't coached it at a high level. So very, very few people in this audience look and immediately see a path for themselves to one day working at Kentucky or working at Texas A&M or working at Michigan State. But I'm telling you, doors are opening every day. And I recognize it because it's been happening in my business. I wouldn't be sitting here 15 years ago. But I'm sitting here now because the game changed in media. And all of a sudden, in the mid-20 teens, a couple of barriers got broken down in the way of overhead and distribution. You used to need multi-million-dollar studios. You used to need big-time legacy media distribution and networking deals for your voice to ever resonate from Seattle to Miami and LA to New York. Now, you just need to be good enough and have internet. And if you are good enough, you can build your own audience. That changed 10 years ago. So here we are. College football is changing. And college football all of a sudden is evolving into a sport that now has not only niche-based roles, but huge front-facing, high-earning positions for guys that may or may not have played the game, may or may not have coached the game. I was on a stage with Courtney Morgan 2 weeks ago in Nashville, and we were doing a panel, and I asked him about what had happened in his life to prepare him to be the GM at Alabama. 80% of what he talked about had nothing to do with football. I mean, he's worked in all kinds of different avenues, totally outside the game. Some of you are in that position right now. And you may or may not love your job, but you'd really love to work inside college football. If you're brilliant with numbers, if you're brilliant with finance, if you're brilliant with communication, if you're brilliant with psychology, there are all kinds of different avenues opening up. This is just another example of it that are gateways, non-traditional, very new age gateways for some of you who love this sport, but you've always had to watch it from outside the fence. To knock down the fence and get inside and find your spot. It's there. I'm telling you, it has never been there in a greater abundance now and in the future than it is today. So it's a very interesting time. This is going to get a lot of people paid. This is going to be a headline that people laugh at being a big deal 5 years from now. All the big-time GMs will be seven-figure per year earners 5 years from now. I got another take for you. I think one of these dudes is going to end up being the head coach of a team. Maybe not a team as high profile as Alabama. Someone out there is going to value this position, and someone out there is going to think they can overspend at the coordinator spots to the point where their head coach doesn't need to check the traditional boxes that a head coach once checked. Someone in an experimental fashion is going to try that. I don't know when, I don't know where, but a guy that today you would call a GM or a director of player personnel, someone's going to make that person a head coach one day. Not in Alabama, but a second or third tier program, and we'll just see how it works out.